So, welcome to the Industry 4.0 Club's Fireside Chat. The club's purpose is to engage the power of diverse, worldwide talent to accelerate the global evolution to Industry 4.0. We accomplish this by hosting and supporting respectful, thoughtful, and interdisciplinary open conversations and creating quality content on wide-ranging Industry 4.0 topics to expand the reach of our community. My name is Mike Ungar, and I am the CEO of the Industry 4.0 Club. I have over 40 years of leadership and experience, with most of that time and experience in manufacturing with Michelin. Today, we're airing the third episode of our series broadcast entitled Lean Industry 4.0, Operational Excellence Meets Technology. Hosting this series with me is Tim Stuart. Tim is the president of Visual Decisions. Tim, would you please introduce yourself a bit more?
Sure. I've been running Visual Decisions for the past 22 years now, since 2002. We have been in the business of collecting information from the shop floor and using that to drive improvements by connecting the data to the lean practices or continuous improvement practices of the organization to really supercharge those improvement efforts. We've worked with customers across a variety of different industries, primarily discrete, but a little bit within batch and so forth. And I look forward to the talk today.
Thanks, Tim. So our broadcast today is entitled The IT-OT Embrace, Closing the Divide. We're really honored today, our guest today, to have with us is Chelsea Tripathi. She's a systems engineer with Tata Consulting Services. Chelsea has several years of experience with Tata supporting projects that require strong IT-OT integration, as well as developing scalable, modern infrastructures. In addition to her work with Tata, she's an avid writer and publisher, having written several books and blogs. Chelsea has a bachelor's degree in electronics and communications engineering from Gujarat Technological University, and she's based out of India. So we're glad, Chelsea, you decided to stay up late to join us live. So welcome, Chelsea.
Thanks for inviting me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Thanks. And for our audience today, if you'd like to ask a question of Chelsea or Tim or myself, please if you're listening to LinkedIn Live, please feel free to write those in the comment section, and we'll try to answer that question as we're talking today. So Tim, would you mind starting us off and sharing some background about our topic relating to the IT-OT integration?
Sure. For a long time, there's been a divide between the IT organization that typically housed at corporate and the operational technology people that work within the plants. One kind of extreme example of this is I was involved with a customer, went in to do a site survey and was working with the people at the plant. Somebody from IT actually showed up on the second day there, and we went through and talked about a lot of the different infrastructure that was in place. And I asked him at one point to draw out on a whiteboard what the actual IT primary components were of the infrastructure. And he went through and put in the ERP system and their data store and their engineering systems and so forth. And he finished and sat down. I asked him, are any of those located at the plant? And he said, oh, and he got back up and he drew a little circle down at the bottom of the diagram and wrote an arrow, and it just said plant. So he had no idea of any software that they were running within the operational technology side. And when I talked to the plant manager afterwards, the plant manager told me at dinner time that was the first time that anybody from the IT organization had ever set foot in the plant. Now, I don't think that most companies have this big of a divide between IT and OT, but that divide definitely exists within an awful lot of organizations. And so what we try to do is we talk with companies and talk about how to implement Industry 4.0, data governance, cybersecurity, how you integrate the different systems together and so forth are of critical importance to driving eventual success. And for that, you need the cooperation between the IT and the OT sides. And so part of what we try to do with customers is to establish a common structure for communication and so forth. And so those are some of the things that I'm hoping to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thanks for sharing the story there. So Chelsea, let's get started. I have a quick question just to kind of get us into the discussion. I know you've worked on several projects that require both IT and OT to really work together. Perhaps you could start us off by just describing what skills that you see each of these organizations, each of these groups within a company bring to an Industry 4.0 project.
Absolutely. So what I have been working on is bridging between the IT and the OT technical teams. And primarily for an Industry 4.0 project, I see these are trying to primarily answer two questions for an Industry 4.0 project. The first one is how fast we can go with this and how big we can go. So how fast is something where the OT would be having the veto with regards to is the OT asset compatible to it, or it's like the technology has really kept up to the IT trends and such. And then on the IT side of it, we have the capacity constraint that probably there's not enough capacity around it. uh, Talking about the skills, basically on those, it depends on the industry 4.0 use case. Like it's on the side of industrial automation, IoTs, and those things. Then we are seeing very heavy specialized set of skills that are on those areas. And then there is an overlap between the IT and the OT side of the skill set. So we have the people like the process engineers, ICT, technology background people, and then enterprise architect who is working to give us the complete picture of it, how all those things are fitting in. And as Tim mentioned, that it's not just a plant there, it's the components of the plant and the components of the IT that are fitting together, and this complete project is then being led to it. So there's the mix and match of the skills that we are bringing in currently.
Do you think that the organizations, do you think in the companies you've been around, do you think that the IT group or the OT team, that they understand what each other brings to the table?
To some extent now, I must say, it was not as I started with this projects and those. There was quite a major ones where we used to have multiple discussion on the same point itself, like trying to understand what the other person is trying to say, and that kind of, there was a repeatability. But now we are seeing that everyone is, since understanding how they are being onboarded to the project, they are able to then understand that, okay, from where these people are coming from.
Tim, how about you? Have you seen something, do you find that they understand each other's, if you will, the skills that they bring to a project? Do you see that in things you've been involved with?
Yes and no. Yeah, I think that from the OT side, they certainly recognize the need for things like cybersecurity. They certainly recognize the need for integration and so on, and that they recognize that the IT people have those skills. I think that there's a perception that the people within IT, on behalf of the operations people, there's a perception that the people within IT don't understand the first thing about how manufacturing actually works. And so I think that that perception certainly clouds the interaction between them. And on the IT side, I definitely think that there's often, not always, but often perception that the people in the plant, live in the Wild West, and that they're just going to go off and do, whatever they want to do, and they're not going to, follow the rules. They're not going to follow the proper procedures for identifying needs, following, proper selection process, looking at how things fit within the entire architecture, and looking at how the total cost of ownership is going to be driven by a lot of the support processes and so forth that need to take place. And so I think on both sides, there's an appreciation for some of the skills that the other side has, but I think there's also a gap in some of those preconceived notions of what the other side does and doesn't know.
What do you guys think? What are some of the obstacles then? So we talked about the understanding of each other's skills, but what are some of the other obstacles that have to be overcome for real synergy between IT and OT when it comes to a project, or really just operationally? Chelsea, you want to start off with that?
Yeah, I can take that first. So from the obstacles, I see one is where the priority or what is important for each of them. That's a very big misalignment on that part of it. That probably, if as Tim was highlighting as well, that if we are seeing a cybersecurity risk that is realized in a terminal, then the operation people might be definitely rushing to the factory floor, and they would be, how many assets am I still able to upkeep? How much of the operation I can still make available? While they can switch to the manual SOPs as well, and they would be scribbling on the Excel sheet, they would be noting down on the notepad, zero like data integrity and confidentiality, obviously we know. Then looking on the side of the IT, the CIA triage is quite a priority for them. They would be very much into, are we maintaining the confidentiality, and are we having the data integrated kind of aspect. And third part is for them the data and the system availability. They are like, it's okay if we take some time of 2 hours or something to bring these things up, rather than letting all the world know that we have been attacked and such obstacle I'm seeing.
Yeah, just to add to that, a couple of things that I've seen. Time pressures are often very different between IT and operations, where operations is being pressed to improve productivity, improve efficiency, improve quality now, today, can't wait. And IT has much more of a longer term picture in mind of, this is an infrastructure, this is a total system that we're trying to build over years. And there's often kind of a tension between those timelines. And then just basic communication structures and how communication happens within those groups is typically very different as well. And they're very often disconnected between those groups. And so I think that you have to fix that gap of communication before really anything else can happen.
Yeah, that's excellent. In my experience, the one thing that I remember quite well is really not following good project management principles, whether I'm in IT or OT. For example, in both cases, I can think of a couple different examples where neither organization, or depends on the project, but where at times, if you're on the OT side, I'm busy producing my product and I'm not able to dedicate the time to the project that needs to be dedicated to. And on the IT side, it's the same thing. I'm so busy dealing with today's ticket, today's problem, that I don't have dedicated resources to commit to the project. And so both of those situations, they cause gaps in communication and also delays in the project. So I think it's also with each group having some level of project management competency, if you will, to understand what's necessary to create a successful project. So I would just share that as well from my experience. So it's really good. It's not easy. I think, Chelsea, you said something along those lines that I thought was interesting when you used the word onboarding. Can you guys have some examples of when you start a project like that, how could you sort of get in front of this and do the right onboarding for these groups before you start a project? What would be some ideas there?
So for the onboarding, particularly, we are looking before the main design and the development stage, we look for a pre-engagement stage. So that is just to understand who are the right set of stakeholders for it. Because not every process engineer who is on the plant floor is gonna contribute towards the Industry 4.0 project or any of those ITOT relating kind of works. So how we set out is one is with regard to the exemplary ones, that this is how we did in this area. And we demonstrated that this is how we are going to probably replicate for you as well. So that has helped in onboarding quite a lot. And in one of the experiences, I remember that we were really chalking out for each of the roles what were the expectations from them, that this is what we are looking from you when you are engaging with us. So if they see that there can be somebody else who would be better at that, rather than, because there are some part of decision making always involved, are they able to take the ownership of it or not? And there's another part of it, are they able to contribute in terms of the data and such? So mainly that is how we onboard them. We start with the pre-engagement, and we start with examples showing them that this is what is needed, and laying out the clear expectation at the onset that this is what we are looking for from you. Would you be able to join us?
Yeah, it's good. Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that the expectations of what are the priorities of each organization and what are the goals that they're trying to achieve need to be very clearly communicated up front. So, what is IT, trying to do? A lot of IT departments that I know of have basically a full, multi-year agenda of different projects that they already have slated. And basically they've committed all the personnel to those different projects. And so when OT comes in and says, this is the number one priority, we've got to go do this, IT's like, okay, this is not in the plan. So, how do you communicate on a more regular basis what that entire agenda looks like, so that some of those upcoming OT priorities can actually get worked into that IT plan in the first place, and you're not trying to shoehorn it in after the fact. And so it's not, the communication on a project by project basis is very important, but establishing the initial working between the IT and the OT side so that they're collaborating on what that longer term vision looks like is very important to establish upfront, even before you start working on individual projects.
Super. So I think one of you mentioned cybersecurity already, and we know cyber is really important. In fact, the role cybersecurity is playing today, it seems even more and more important. With you hear a lot about hacking and ransoms and just the different nefarious actors out there in the world. So when we implement an Industry 4.0 project, cyber is extremely important. What are some of the best ways to ensure that it's taken care of throughout the project, from your experiences?
So, thanks, Tim. So from my perspective, I would really suggest to go early on this, and that is where we start with the mini assessment phase before we have the design and the development phase kicking for an Industry 4.0 project. And that is where I have also seen a fair chance of acceptance from the client as well when we are selling it to them. When we come with a bundle of that, there would be a assessment phase as well to have a check that what is the current posture of the cybersecurity and such, and we identify the flaws. Probably that is where we might have to work a little bit harder for that. And then there is another one with regards to going in the testing phase while we are having the deployment of it. So it's not just your main features which you promised to deliver as part of the use case you are testing on those ones. You are also testing for the cybersecurity side of it, just a bit of components, but you bring on those arms as well. And the second point is, I believe in the beginning, Tim was saying that IT has a perception that probably OT is going to work their own way after we leave them. So that is where I be saying when they are leaving the enterprise, then leave them with an advice and education that if X, Y, or Z is coming to your terminal, then where to put it. So it can be the case of I see it in time of the Purdue model. So we might restrict some of the things on the DMC level itself. We don't want it on the second floor. And some things we might let it allow in the ICS firewall and those areas. And we might there is where we would want you to leave them, kind of. And yes, there is where the enterprises are also very appreciative of that, going that one milestone, that, okay, they are they took the effort and they deliver this way to us.
Yeah, and adding on to that, from an OT perspective, I work much more on the OT side, so I'm more familiar with that perspective of things. Cybersecurity is just, it's viewed as a necessary evil, basically. That it's something that gets in the way of progress, but it has to be done. And the OT people are never in charge of what the cybersecurity policies are, but it's very important for them to be aware of what those policies are, so that as they're doing their evaluations and as they're doing different projects and so forth, they can adhere to those different policies. And I think that where IT needs to, in some organizations, needs to adjust a little bit, is taking more of the operational requirements into account when they're initially defining what those cybersecurity policies are going to be. I was just at a company last week where I had a chance to talk to the person that was in charge of cybersecurity for the entire organization. And they were trying to catch up after the fact because they had selected partners that had implemented and gone in a certain direction. And they found out that the systems that OT had in place weren't compatible with the direction that they had gone on the cybersecurity side.
Mm.
And so because there was that disconnect between IT and OT, now they were having to decide, okay, do we adapt the new cybersecurity policies that we just put in place to account for the legacy OT systems? Or do we now have to go and replace those legacy OT systems with something else that will adhere to the cybersecurity policy? And so there has to be that communication there, and there has to be an understanding from both sides of what those requirements are, what the different options are, and how to best go about structuring that.
I think it's really, if I think about it, it's very difficult in some ways. The OT guys are doing their thing, and in fact, when the system's always running, you almost don't know that cyber exists, right? Cybersecurity exists. And that's part of the problem, is that they don't understand that the reason why they're able to do what they're doing in many cases is because it's working fine. And so it's kind of like out of sight and out of mind. And I think the more we can, even more routinely, if I'm in the IT organization, talk to OT about that so that they understand what's happening behind the scenes, I think all the better. And it's the same thing on the IT side. They're dealing with, intrusions all the time, and they're blocking the very things that would stop OT. But OT never hears about it. So to kind of create that, hey, here's what we just accomplished this week, so that you could keep running. So I think there's a need for that. And we hit on this topic of communication earlier, but that's also a really valuable way to kind of make that happen. Which really kind of leads me to the next question I've got, or the thing to think about, is how do we educate each other, IT and on OT issues and OT on IT issues, to how to help bridge this gap? What are some things you've seen done that work well in that arena? Maybe start with Tim this time.
One of the actions that this customer last week was taking is that they're actually creating kind of a hybrid organization. So people that were working on the OT side now have dotted lines to people within IT, and some of the IT organization are having dotted lines to operations. So that with that direct support and direct reporting, or indirect reporting, I guess, in matrix organization, but you now are basically forcing that communication to happen, and you're forcing some of those expectation settings and understandings to be shared across the different organizations. So that's one way. It's a fairly heavy lift to make that happen. I think there are probably easier ways of establishing regular communication protocols and so forth between the different groups. But I think it depends on what the existing structures are for communication within the company today, how the different executives work with one another and so forth, and then how they align their teams. And so different ways to go about it, but there's definitely a need for it.
Chelsea?
Yes, and I would be agreeing with that, Tim, that we are seeing a hybrid way of approach from the manufacturer and the enterprises as well. And there is one aspect which I'm also seeing is amongst the best practices that they are not just reviewing the lessons learned in terms of only the technological aspect of it. Now they are going full on the process and the people aspect of it. That probably there was that element involved in something not working out, and they are trying to resolve if it was an miscommunication or a misunderstanding which could have been remediated, and going back to the onboarding cycle, and that they could have improved it. And they are bringing the interdisciplinary and the cross-functional teams actually in the same room of the decision making, and that is where we are seeing that when we are going for an engagement phase with a customer or something, then we are having both the side of people who are speaking their perspective on that problem and the issue. It's not just we are hearing someone's point of view and then we check it with another counterpart and they are saying, oh, that's not the case. We are all good here. So that's one of the things I'm saying.
That's very good. I think that, I think about, and it's been a few years, but I think about the idea of the story that you shared at the start, Tim, where, so why, if you're an OT person, you invite the IT guy to just take a tour of the plant.
Yeah.
Let's get down and let's get in and let's show each other. And then, like I said, the flip side is for the IT guys to show the OT guys the things that they're working on that are invisible. A lot of times it's just really, trying to create some empathy for each other's missions, if you will. That was really cool. So as we kind of think through, we've talked about a lot of things around how we bridge this IT OT divide and really have them, I use the word embrace each other, but at least not push each other away, so to speak. What are some of the principles that companies should follow to really make this an effective relationship between IT and OT? Maybe we can begin to summarize some of those principles. Chelsea, you want to start us off with that?
Yes, I would. The first one that comes to my mind, like there are two or three of them, but the first one that comes is definitely defining the KPIs and metrics in terms of both the people, IT and the OT. So when we are saying, okay, we want to have 99.98% availability, just in case, then for what does it mean in terms of the IT? Does their system needs, obviously they need to be up and running for the whole time, but then we are taking the maintenance period in them, and then we are upgrading our systems and such. We are doing the patch management and such. And when we say the availability on the side of OT, what does that mean? Not the whole factory floor is going to run for 24 hours by 7. It's gonna be in the shift how we are planning for that and such. So defining the KPIs and metrics in terms of both IT and OT. And then another one is um, developing a common language between both of them. So when I say that there's an issue X, then ultimately all the teams are just going there and assigning this is the priority, this is the criticality. And then OT is looking at the scope that what is the scope? Is it affecting my all the assets, or it's just a limited set of assets, or it's just the increase in number of warnings which I will be getting in the system? So that is where develop that common language that when we are talking between the teams, be empathetic that the other person now completely understand the meaning what it has and the impact it might have, and be able to translate it that okay, how does it apply for them? So those two key principles, I must say that enterprises should be looking forward to when they are saying let's close the divide between IT and OT.
Those are some really good suggestions. Tim, what other principles would you bring to an IT-OT relationship?
Let's see. Clear communications around security that we've talked about already. Some of the data governance. Chelsea talked about KPIs and how those KPIs are defined. being able to make sure that things are calculated the same way across the entire organization is something that creates a lot of doubt. I don't know about anybody else, but I've walked into an awful lot of meetings where people are talking about the same KPI, but they're using different numbers for it because they've exported information from one system into Excel. They're doing their own calculations, and they're coming up with their own numbers for what OEE is or anything else. And so there becomes a lot of distrust of the underlying information. And reporting is kind of an opportunity to work together as a team to define what those KPIs are, how they should be calculated, what the sources of information should be for those, and work together to create reporting across those different areas. I've seen some projects where just within the OT side, things were a mess. Working with firearms manufacturer, I was charged with creating a corporate dashboard for quality. And they only had 9 plants, but we uncovered 57 different data sources for quality information between testing systems, inspection systems, SPC, etc. And when I talked to IT about it and asked them where all the quality data was, they said, oh, it's all in SAP. And when I finished laughing, I was like, okay, really? Where is it, and so forth. But being able to then take those different systems, take that information, put that into a common data store, and have that information now be accessible to the different people in the organization that should have access to it, and driving that data governance, driving those common definitions and so forth, and common calculations is something that created a large win for that organization.
That's really neat. I think the other thing for me that I would just add is I think we've talked about indicators, both you did, and data governance, but I think what could be also kind of neat is especially when you're trying to build an organization, if you've got it established, maybe one thing, but when you're trying to build that relationship, sometimes expecting, if you will, or that each of them have the same indicator on their scorecards. That maybe the IT guys carry in maybe the key OT scorecard or item, and then vice versa, so that they can actually talk about results. And when I say results, common results, rather than, well, this is my scorecard and your scorecard. I think that the more we can create opportunities for them to be together on things that are important to both of them, which is really their joint success, I think the more the better in terms of principles, So just would share that as well.
Yeah. Coming at it from more of the OT perspective, one of the things that would be interesting to some of the people in OT that I've talked to would be that they feel that the measurements for the IT organization aren't aligned with the goals of the company as a whole. That the IT organization is measured on their own things as opposed to the success of manufacturing, the success of the company as a whole. Whereas the OT organization is measured on, what is my production, what's my quality level, etc. And so the way that they're measured aligns directly with the goals of the company. So some of that feeds into that perception of there being that gap. And so I'm not sure the best way to close that, but it is one thing that I think could be interesting to look at.
And just to add on to that point, because there was this one example happening at my front, and that was we were trying to calculate an FT for an ITOT converged organization. They were transforming completely, and we were trying to build those. We did not have a blueprint or a reference, like how do we bring those people? And that was where then we have to develop our own framework and bring on our own expertise that, okay, how should we bring in and how should we calculate FTEs which are relevant for this industry. It's not just that, between the manufacturing also you can just bring those FTEs from, say, utility sector to your pharmaceuticals and the other sectors. It's gonna vary a lot, and that is where the organization also need to make it intentional effort that they are not just duplicating, that okay, certain X organization is doing it in that way. We just need those people only. We don't need extras.
When we would do a project, there was a time, I'm not saying recently, but there was a time when we would ask IT, can we do this? And they would say no. And eventually what happened is we said, look, don't tell us no. We tell us if we were to do it, what would we have to do to make it happen and keep the things secure that you're concerned about? So a lot of it was changing the question, not from can we do it, but how could we do it in such a way that we would respect what you're trying, your mission and what you're trying to accomplish as well. And of course, that changed the whole conversation. It may be complex, it may be difficult, but how could we do it? And then that opens up the chance for dialogue and understanding. So I think that's also one of the key principles to keep in mind. Well, so we've been talking for the last 35 minutes or so about how do we create this IT/OT embrace, close this divide. And as we reach kind of the end of our conversation here, I want to give each of you the opportunity to kind of share a final thought with our audience. So maybe Tim, we'll start with you. Give a final thought on this topic about closing the divide between IT and OT.
Sure. Just a quick one, because I think most of the points have been made already that I wanted to make, but just the importance of it. It is critical that these teams work together more than ever before. You can't have passwords on devices not being set on the shop floor that are exposed to the internet so that it becomes a point of entry for attackers. You can't have access to machines being given over so that you can create safety hazards by outside organizations coming in and taking over the processing of a machine and so forth. It's absolutely critical that the organizations learn how to work together. I think that establishing that initial communication is a good first step, but then I think that there needs to be that cooperation across multiple fronts.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Chelsea, what are your final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up today?
First one is thanks for this opportunity. It was a really pleasure talking to you, everyone. My final thoughts majorly are around how this IT/OT would be an enabler for the larger picture which the organization are looking for as the vision for Industry 4.0. So that is majorly the 4.0 is a use case by use case journey. And when we say the IT/OT embrace, what we mean is also when an Industry 4.0 initiative is undertaken by either part of the side, either it is IT or the OT, then look it in the terms of the milestone-based journey and what is the outcome for that. And understand probably there might be a point in that journey where probably OT is giving too much effort into it, but the results are being gained by an IT side of it. It should not be the case that OT is being like, oh, I have worked on that project or the initiative since 2 years or 3 years, and I am not seeing anything change for me. It is definitely changing on the side of the IT or the vice versa kind of scenario. So just embrace that this IT and OT is not just like a 6 months exercise, which we are doing. It's a change in the mindset, which we are doing, and we are trying to understand the other side of the world as well.
Thank you very much for that. So I just want to thank Tim and Chelsea for joining us for this very insightful discussion. I hope that everybody who's been listening has had a chance to take something away that will be valuable. And thank you to all of you who have joined us to listen in to what we've had to say. And of course, especially you want to thank those who are joining us live from India. I know it's late in the evening, and we're really glad that you could join us. So we want to invite our listeners to participate in future broadcasts as well. So if you're interested, there's a way to apply on our website and LinkedIn. and through our newsletter. So we'd love to engage you or others in a future broadcast. The Industry 4.0 Club hosts conversations like these on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, alternating topics around the themes of women in manufacturing, the future of manufacturing, fireside chat with an industry leader, and people, process, and culture. And again, please join us on our LinkedIn page or visit our website at www.industry40club.com. And to conclude, thanks again, Chelsea and Tim, and I wish everybody a wonderful day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.